I'm Mickey Hughes, and this is an amateur guide on how to be a sommelier. Wine is the most civilized thing in the world, or so said Ernest Hemingway. I'm inclined to agree. There's something sophisticated about enjoying a glass of wine, but the world of wine can be off-putting, the people can be snobbish, the information's endless, and the choices can go on forever. There are so many varieties and types of wine that it's hard to know where to begin. That's where sommelier comes in. A sommelier's job as a wine expert is to interact with guests, usually at a restaurant, to help them to select a wine that it will complement and enhance the flavor of the food that they're going to enjoy. Demystifying the process of how a sommelier selects, tastes, and serves wine can help individuals to develop their own palates and to be able to enjoy the complexities of wine for themselves. Just like any new learner, sommeliers start with the basics, and the basics are red grapes and white grapes. White grapes are known by a number of different varieties, have different flavors. Some of them are Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Grigio, Moscato, Riesling. These are all really popular. A lot of people know of those. For red wine, it's going to be Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, Merlot. Some of my favorites are Grenache and Tempranillo. And while I'm focusing mostly on the red and white wines, there are three other categories that come into play as well. That's rosé, sparkling, and dessert wines. Rosé gets its flavor from sitting on the skins of grapes for just a few hours usually. Fun fact, the juice from all grapes is white when it is pressed. Red wine gets its flavor and color from sitting on the skins for a few days usually. There's sparkling wine that has bubbles or carbonation that can occur naturally during the fermentation process or injected artificially afterwards after it's bottled. And dessert wine, like its name implies, is on the sweeter side and typically enjoyed at the end of a meal. So now that we have the basics, the red and the whites are what we're focusing on, we can look at the region from where the wine comes from. That'll help to further make a selection. A sommelier learns how climate or terroir affects the flavor and the resulting wine from the grape. In cooler climates, grapes ripen over a longer period of time, and some varieties don't grow well in cold weather at all, so it somewhat limits the type of wine that is grown in these regions. Because fruit is slow to ripen, it's usually lower in sugar content and alcohol content. Its characteristics for the reds are going to be tart usually, maybe herbaceous and earthy, somewhat lean in flavor. For white, it's going to be more on the acidic side, think less sugar, more sour, maybe even like floral, and again, light in color. Warm climate vineyards usually yield wines that are higher in alcohol. They have stronger and bolder flavor profiles. Red wines are going to be maybe jammy, think more like ripened fruit, plums, cherry. For warm climate white wines, you're thinking more of the tropical fruits like mango or melon, the stone fruit like apricot or peach. Those are some of the basic flavor profiles that you can kind of reach for when you're tasting these wines for yourself or trying to decide what to serve for you and your guests. Once a sommelier learns what wine is and where it comes from, he can use his senses in order to taste the wine and serve the wine. But he'll learn that tasting the wine is not the first sense that you want to use. In fact, using your sense of sight is usually the first. Once the wine is poured, you can give it a swirl, give it that posh look very sophisticated. Look at the color, look at the thickness, look at how it sits on the inside of the glass. That'll give an indication of the alcohol content. You can look up legs in wine. Usually the thicker the legs, the higher the alcohol content. Think syrup versus water on the inside of a glass. You can also read the labels to get an idea of where the vineyard is. That'll give you information maybe on whether or not it was a warm or cooler climate that the grape was grown in, and that can guide you on the selection. Next, the sommelier learns to use his sense of smell. He'll go in for a good whiff. Nose right in the bowl is completely acceptable. And you want to breathe deeply through the nose. Try to identify some of the aromas and the flavors that you're smelling. You might even get some of that on the tongue, the taste. Is it going to be dark? Is it light? Think any adjective that works for you to describe the wine. It's a great place to start. Finally, you can taste the wine. Have a sip. seems rude, but you do swish and slurp the wine a little bit. Swishing allows the wine to hit different parts of the mouth. You might taste a bitter flavor on the back of the mouth, the more sweet or sour towards the front. You might even taste something a little salty. It all depends. So really try to get it distributed through your mouth through swishing. The air is what helps to give more flavor. The air interacts with the aromas and the compounds, the chemicals in the wine, and helps to open it up on the palate, as they say. Before you swallow, I had to swallow in order to keep giving this guide, but before you swallow, you sip on it like it's hot coffee, like you took a drink of hot coffee or a spoonful of soup that was too hot and you're trying to cool it off. Suck in some air. If you're at a wine tasting, it's absolutely okay to spit the wine out. And then at the end of the tasting, think about how the tongue feels. Does your tongue feel sandpapery? That might indicate that it's high in tannins. It might have that feel to the tongue where it's almost sticky. Or you may feel like your mouth is coated in something sweet like syrup, if it's a dessert wine or maybe even a sweeter wine or higher in alcohol content. Make a mental note of not just the flavor, but also the feel of the wine. That'll really help to develop your palate in order to be able to taste wine like a sommelier. There's other information about being a sommelier. Everything is taken into consideration: how the wine is bottled, how it's served, even the glass. There are a few options. This is a typical red wine glass. This is going to be a white wine glass. All of these things affect the experience for the guest and for the sommelier when they're tasting wine. And all of these things you can look up for yourself in order to learn more information. What I find most helpful, though, is to think of wine like an adventure. My favorite tip from Sommelier is to just try a lot of wine and find out what you like for yourself. Hopefully that gives you a good start and you can start tasting wine and enjoying more wine for yourself.